So, welcome everybody to communicating the value of IMRN work and initiatives. Before I formally start, I'd like to start with you guys saying hello to everybody before we formally start with our program. So, we'll do it from Claire, Shona to Ryan. Just say hello to everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Good
Shona?
morning, everyone. Claire's done. Are you finished, Claire? Do you want to
Yeah.
do all? Yeah. So yeah. Good morning from the other side of Edinburgh.
Morning,
Yeah,
everybody.
there we go. And that's Ryan. So, our topic today is communicating the value of IMRM work and initiatives. And this is part of our continuing conversation from the very good session we had with Alison North. So this is a part of that. And beyond that conversation is when we run the survey, whatever aspects of your work um, has a surface, communication has always been a thread where but we have some issues with convincing other people or getting budget for this one. So it all boils down to that, communicating the value of the work that we do. And it's a challenging thing. It's a constant challenge that we face, whatever the role is, whatever role you have within the IMRM profession. Now, at IRMS, okay, so the one in the middle, that's how I always feel as an IMRM profession, and I'm sure all of us are the same way. Because it's like, um, as an IMRM professional, there are skills we cannot just depend on our core skills. Core skills being, of course, the IM and RM, which we've either done by experience or done by education. Um, we cannot solely rely on that. These skills, the other skills, are the skills that we need to develop along the way to have to be able to successfully do a lot of the work that and initiatives that we have within the workplace. So we need the technical skills. We need to understand the 365, the documentums, the ABBYY, the scanners and all that stuff. There's a lot of things there. We also need soft skills, and communications is one of the key soft skills that is important in our profession, because most of the time people don't seem to immediately get the value of the initiatives we have, and that's the reason why it's essential to have communication skills so that we can communicate this. And of course, the domain skills being, you know education, specific industry, profession, government, council, industry verticals like finance, or those are domain skills basically. Now, when we run all these webinars, we don't randomly run it. I try to look at these skills that we need to develop as a professional and try to, at least on the webinars, offer you skills that are around this. So we cannot just focus on tech, we cannot just focus on core, because as a holistic professional, we need to be able to give you a bit of something on all of those. So there is order in the madness of the webinars. So trust us with that one. And this is the order that I'm trying to look at. Um, so our agenda today is, well, that's myself. So I said, my introduction, perspective on communication. So Claire will start off with, from the outside looking in, the consultant's perspective on communications. Um, I will do the communicating value things. I'll give you some actually two tips that have always worked for me, whatever implementation, whatever initiative, whatever work I'm in. And of course, Shona across sectors, organizational culture influences, and Ryan will be giving us some feedback about their experiences with at HES, Historic Environment Scotland. And then we go back to Claire for the wrap up. So Claire, I am giving you the stage now. Let me
Cheers.
stop sharing and
Thanks, Maria. Gosh, it's
and
yeah,
give you the stage. Yep. There we go.
So many buttons to press, so many things to look at on screen.
Sorry,
including my really terrible hair at the moment. But I'm in awe of Shona's neat bun.
Yeah.
Everybody's giving
Because it's too
feedback
long.
on your neat hair, Shona.
Right.
Facelift.
Okay, this is just a very brief kind of reflection from me about the kind of communication skills that consultants require. They may not be unique to being a consultant, but it does present some quite particular challenges. I think the key thing about being a consultant is that you have to establish influence in an organization that is unknown to you, that has its own internal dynamics and environment, and it's trying to absorb all of that whilst analyzing and assessing and evaluating the actual issue. So I guess the main challenge is how to establish influence, how to put forth your brand and give the organization a clear sense of what the pathway is. So what's different about being a consultant than being an in-house records information manager? So typically you approach a project as a consultant because you've responded to an invitation to tender and won it, and you then are faced with making sense of a project brief, and you have to establish an effective dialogue with your project lead or the project sponsor, might be the business owner. Terminology is various. And so you need to understand that both in terms of what the client thinks they want, what it thinks they know about the problem, and all the other things that constitute the issue that the client hasn't put in the tender. So there's a lot of analysis skills and interpretation skills needed as part of your communication skill set. Again, perhaps that's not unique to being a consultant, but perhaps you're not backed up by having an understanding of the organizational dynamics, so that you have to do a lot of gap filling and asking impertinent questions, as well as perhaps more obvious ones. So what are you there to do? Well, understanding the issues, trying to reveal new insights about a given problem, understanding the context and broadening out perhaps the issue identified in the invitation to tender. You know, you have to maintain and revisit what the project brief is and keep a clarity of focus around that, when you might be getting lots of different noise from different parts of the organization as you go and do your analysis and your data audits and whatever that might be. And keep checking in with your project sponsor, your project lead as well, to make sure that you are going to deliver what it is they require, and also to understand the scope if adjustments need to be made. So it's a kind of constant dialogue, and that is the key thing. It is not an opportunity for a monologue. There will need to be good at written communication, verbal communication, whatever it is, to move the organization through the stages from there, understanding the as is and the dynamics around that, to their to be state. And you've got to communicate the vision of that as part of your offering as a consultant. And that's very difficult to do when you're coming in cold to an organization. You don't know the personalities, you don't know the power structure. You can get some of an insight from your project lead, but that's not the only perspective. So it's how do you establish an objective perspective on things. You're bringing fresh eyes in, and that is why it's good to ask impertinent or naive questions. Both of those have a use in order to kind of really dig into what the actual problem is, so that you can actually provide some value added to not just answering the question on the paper, on the invitation to tender, but you actually demonstrate that you have a mature and far-reaching understanding of the organization. As Maria said, Alison in her seminar went through a lot of detail around the project stages and the different kinds of environment. But typically, the things that affect your communication style are going to be what the hierarchy is in the organization. What's the audience that you are getting access to? Is it service managers, operational staff? Is it the strategic lead? Or is it a committee or a project board that's overseeing what you're doing? So again, you need to be able to attune your message and the way that you communicate that message, obviously, to the audience. And that's not unique to being a consultant, an external consultant. But I think the kind of skill set that you need to have really sharp, and I've been doing this 10 years and I'm still learning and hopefully improving my skill set to be more animated and more have the wits around me in terms of the analysis of and understanding the objective and suggesting appropriate solutions. So I think the first one is having a really developed sense of emotional intelligence so that you can get on well with people and that you can also manage yourself well in a new situation that might be quite a tense situation in an organization, and you feel you're being sort of cast around on the different waves of perhaps how shall I say it? The challenges around organizational change. So typically, if you've been brought in as part of a project that's dealing with organizational change or a new regulatory obligation, so GDPR or property rationalization, there's going to be a lot of intrinsic tensions in the organization, and you need to be able to acknowledge that, but not get sort of swept up in it. So it is about that emotional intelligence of reading the dynamics of the people that you meet and the organizational context. I'd say the second thing is about having cohesion and clarity around communication. Again, that's not unique to an organization. Looking in, if you're a member of staff providing an internal consultancy service, you certainly need to have those skills as well. But understanding the ways in which it is appropriate to communicate, the style of written language is really absolutely key. I spent a year with the ECB, for example, and getting into the style of how they constructed reports and recommendations and advice documents was really difficult for me, even though I'd come from a university background with lots of committees, lots of formal structures, big initiatives around change management and information management as a part of that, and risk management and all of those things that we're all familiar with. So getting the message across, being able to communicate clearly, concisely, appropriately, with the right level of formality, is something, as an external consultant, you're coming in too cold. And that's really hard to get right. But you only get one chance to make a first impression. So certainly in terms of verbal communication, that's a really key skill that you need to hone. And as I say, even after 10 years, I'm still reflecting on how I do things, what I say, how I come across, and getting effective feedback when you're an external consultant is often really difficult, because the organization, the client, has moved on to the next thing, and you've only got clients. You don't have the luxury of colleagues. I've been very fortunate in the past to work on collaborative projects with other information professionals, and that's been really great, because it gives you an opportunity to have short-term colleagues, I guess, to help you kind of interpret situations, so that if there's two of you in a meeting, one is taking notes, one is perhaps presenting. It's a kind of, to use an analogy from the sort of the television or theatre world, one's a producer, one's a director. One is actually delivering to the audience and overseeing the production. The other is looking at the details, ensuring that things are recorded, and that you can then move on to the next stage with comprehensive information. So cohesion and clarity is then another thing as a consultant you'll need to have fairly sharp. I think going alongside with that is having a manner that's approachable, that shows confidence in what professional skills we have, and also encourages dialogue, not as the graphic has it, which is, I guess, demonstrating a monologue. And I think the key thing is how do you do this, and making sure that you're conveying a sense of confidence around the solutions that you're proposing. This may take pictures as well as words. Not just verbal or written communication. You've got to actually convey an idea. You're selling a vision of the to-be situation. So it's then about explaining to the client, whoever that might be, getting the project lead alongside to see the vision of where it is you want to end up. So infographics are great. Clip art is fantastic. Shutterstock, whatever it is, try and get people engaged with an image, with a vision of where they are going to be, and the kinds of immediate benefits that your solution will offer, and try and make that personalized and immediate to whoever in your audience you're focusing on. It's not just a sort of at an operational level. That's really important, but it's also feeding into established initiatives, aligning with strategic goals and objectives, lots of things around that alignment issue. And it's constantly communicating to your client what you can accomplish by them taking on your recommendations, because with the best will in the world, you're not going to be around to deliver that. So you need to have created enough interest and belief from within the organization into what your solutions are, so that they can take that forward, and you can perhaps establish internal advocates for change within the organization. I mean, there's various statistics around how change is managed and the timescale that it takes for change to embed. So you need to make sure your client understands all of that, that it is going to be an investment for the future as well as the short term, and that also, you know, all of the components and the solutions they need to take on. So often at the end of projects, the client says, yes, that's great, but we're not going to do the training. You know, we've run out of money, or we've run out of opportunity, or perhaps some other initiative has come along that's overtaken yours. Well, if they don't invest in the training, they're never going to be able to embed that change that you have identified for them. And that, I think, is a typical experience around being an external consultant, and typically one of the frustrations, because you never see the end of the process through the training, through the regular review, and you know, that is certainly one of the issues that you need to be aware of as a consultant, that you might not be the person there to oversee it. So I'm just aware time is moving on, so I will just bring this to a close by providing a summary, gone to words in the end. So, as I've said, it's about going beyond the content. It's going beyond what the project brief originally says. It's asking questions and using tools, words and pictures to your advantage. It is about forging relationships effectively in the organization, so that you have embedded your values, the values of good information management, into that organization, and they value the change and the pain that comes with that change. And they can see the vision of what they want to achieve. And that's really fundamental in that projecting confidence in your project, so that you are offering them a positive vision of how they can improve, how they can deliver on effectiveness, efficiency, better use of IT resource. Being able to understand and be able to reflect on what you offer in terms of you as a person, and also your professional knowledge, is absolutely key, and a really fundamental part of, I would say, being an information manager, not just as a consultant. I hope you found that helpful and interesting, and that it's given you some food for thought. Certainly looking forward to hearing and seeing your questions at the end of the session. And I've now got to get out of my little loop with my presentation and hand you over to Maria, who's going to talk a bit more about the value piece around what we do. So I shall mute myself now and
Okay, here we go. Sorry. There's a lot of clicks that I had to do there. So, what I'm sharing with you, uh, thank you from Jenny. Okay, there we go. So, what I'm sharing with you guys is something that has worked for me over the years. When I saved me when I moved over to the UK, um, and and basically helped me with a lot of successful implementations, whatever the size of the implementation is, whether I'm doing it as a consultant, whether I'm doing it as an employee. It has always worked for me. I've had to tweak it a lot when I moved to the UK. As most of you would know, I originally came from the Philippines, Southeast Asia. And we have my training has been very Americanized. We were basically under the rule of the Americans for a while. So a lot of it is I've had to tweak when I moved here because there's some differences. So let's focus on this one, because with this one slide, it it would give you the success or the failure sometimes. Okay, so you need to find the value in hierarchy. And what does that mean? There's hierarchy in a number of organizations where you can basically group the stakeholders that you need so that you can be supported, eh, because you can communicate the value of what you are, of the initiative or the project that you're trying to put through. So the first, let's go to the first layer, the individual. Now this is very cultural because I came from a culture of, if it's good for everyone, it must be good for me as well. So it's a very communal community kind of outlook. So this viewpoint only works if you're within a Western kind of organization. Um, And I guarantee you it is because I was talking at a London webinar one time, and one of the big organizations was saying, they, we have an organization in Asia, they can't seem to get it. I said, did you tell them that it's good for everyone? And they said, no, we just continued with the message that we have, which is what's in it for me. I said, it's not going to work. You have to say, if you're in Asia, you have to say how it would be good for everyone rather than what's in it for me. Okay. So imagine I was coming from that side into the UK and I was communicating that way, and I'm like, it's not working. What was wrong? Because here, what's in it for me is core. And it has nothing to do with being selfish. It's just that, well, if I go to this one, if I'm going to invest time to learn about this and all that, what will it do for me? It needs to have that value. And that is very important. If I learn SharePoint, what value would it give me? Okay, if I learn Documentum, what value would it give me? If I tag my documents with the tagging system you want me to do, what will it do for me? Kind of scenario. So that is a key question that you need to ask. That is the most important question because from a stakeholder perspective, the individual is your biggest group. These are the people who will be affected, who gets affected by the work you do, and who will be affected by any initiative, new projects that you're going to create for your IMRM work. So the next layer is the team or the business unit. And what they're interested in is, will it increase productivity? And it can go into harsh environments and community type of environment. If I say harsh, the team area is, if some organizations say, will it increase productivity? Most of Some of the time it's like, well, I want what can be done in 4 hours to be done in 1 hour, so that, you know so that we can reduce staff, because we have an initiative to reduce number of staff or to move people around so that they can move to another area, or they can continue to do their core function instead of these other function. So that is the next question with your work and initiative. Will it increase productivity? Okay? Will something that they're doing for 4 hours be done in 1 hour? Okay. So that those are the core questions with that. Now, when you move to the higher level, the organization and the executive team, the questions that are normally asked there is with your with your with your heads of organizations is what you're offering a solution to a problem I'm currently having? That is a key question for that level of hierarchy. Because if it's not worth my time. One. The second thing is, will it reduce cost? Those are the values that you need to focus on communicating when you are communicating to these layers of people. That's the reason why um, when you do your presentation to different groups of stakeholders, you need to tweak it to suit the audience, because otherwise they will not be seeing the value. So you need to make sure that if you are presenting this to your user group, that what's highlighted is the what's in it for me. If it's the team or the middle managers area, it should highlight the increase in productivity. And if it's the upper C level, is it a solution? Will it reduce cost? And basically, is it a quick win for me? I am the CEO of this company. I need to make sure that good initiatives are allocated to my reign. In some organizations, it's as harsh as that. It's like, I don't really care about the next CEO or the next thing, as long as this is going to be successful within my reign. And some CEOs are that straightforward, or executive level. Now, how does it how would this work? So if you are doing, let's say, what's the most common thing we do? We are implementing a a migration to Microsoft 365 for the first time. So let's see how the hierarchy will go. So on an individual level, what's in it for me if we have Microsoft 365? Well, as an individual, the benefits of it is you can work remotely. Right now, that is an individual benefit. You can work remotely. You can access your files wherever you are. So you don't need to be somewhere. You don't need to be in a desktop in a specific building in a specific table anymore. As an individual, that has a lot of benefits because that gives you flexibility. On a team level, will it increase productivity? Well, because you are centralizing um, your applications into one platform. You don't need to go to five different applications to do your work. You're only focusing it on one. So therefore, you are much quicker in doing that. And I'm sure you guys would think of a lot of other team productivity things. Um, Another thing that I used before with team productivity was resourcing. It's actually quicker to onboard people on Microsoft 365 because it's a common platform. Therefore, the I know, the 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 cost of training them before they become productive is much shorter. And that is proven because 365 is such a common application, and it works with any other common application. Because it's such a common application, if we need new people, the onboarding time is lower, if none at all. People just get on board and basically run with it because it's such a common application. Is it the solution, and will it reduce cost? Because of the M365 move from capex to the subscription level, from a cost perspective, you are getting so much for a subscription level investment. So a lot of executives and finance people like the option of Microsoft 365. So this is how you can run through that. And I'm wondering if you guys have done something like that. Put it on the chat or the question. So that's my 365 example. Now I'll put you to other initiatives that I've done. So I've done a governance implementation on the and the very very specific. We were having an issue with a group of people who are of a certain age in the organization when when we were implementing 365. As far as they're concerned, I am retiring in 5 years time or 2 years time or 1 year time. Why will I learn a new system? I could just, I could I could do a dash for it, retire. I don't need to learn this new system that you're trying to give me. So funnily enough, that was an easy solution. So we looked at what the issue is of these specific groups of people, because they're important, because these are the guys with massive experiences that we need to harvest before they go on retirement. But it's very difficult to move them on a new platform. So we're like going, what are we going to do? So the what's in it for me wasn't working, because as far as they're concerned, who cares? I'm retiring in a year or 2 years time. So we looked at what they were doing. They were doing their work in Excel, and we were trying to show them how to do the Excel file from a collaborative perspective via SharePoint. So they were looking at the SharePoint as a new learning thing instead of the Excel. So what we did was we just created a shortcut for him on the Excel. He doesn't need to know that the Excel file he was working on is on SharePoint. That functionality is there since what? SharePoint 2003. He doesn't need to go into SharePoint. He doesn't need to do anything. So the only thing we gave him was exactly the same Excel file he was working on. What he doesn't know is every time he updates it, it automatically gets updated. Yes, that's right, Shona. Records management myself. He doesn't know that it gets updated on SharePoint. So he can go through his work like he normally does, but we still did the SharePoint implementation, and it was fine. He doesn't need to learn SharePoint. He can he can just happily just do his Excel, and that worked really really well. And that's a classic example of finding those values. um Another classic thing when it comes to cost is, uh, I had a project where I had to show the value of work in actual dollars and cents. Okay, because the executives and the middle managers were going, if it doesn't show an actual cost reduction or how we're going to save money, whatever it is, it's, we won't consider it. And a lot of us get into this situation. So I'm like, how am I going to find that value? So in this particular scenario, I was insisting that we need to organize the files so that people can find things much quicker. Okay. So I went on Google, and there are stats on Google on what's the average time that people actually spend searching for stuff. That is available online. So I took that. So let's say, as an example, on average, people spend about 5 hours of their time searching for stuff because they couldn't find it. They don't know where it was. And I've seen this within the organization. I could see people rummaging through filing cabinets and stuff because they can't find anything. And these people have core skills that are needed in core functions. Yet, instead of doing their core function, they're searching. Okay, so I have one value. The value was the average time a person um, a person searches for something. So that's 5 hours. And then I need another value. I need a dollars and cents value. So I need to think through. I went to HR and said, within this organization, what is the average pay? So I need an average pay because HR would have done exactly the same, similar dollars and cents scenario. So let's say 500 500 pounds a day or 500 pounds a week, whatever value that HR gives you. So now you have two important values that you could use. Now, the third value is if you do your IMRM work, how quickly can you reduce the 5 hour, how what's your target improvement on the hours. So if the average you got from the internet is 5 hours, and you know that if you do your IMRM work, it's going to be reduced to let's say conservatively 2 hours. So therefore, you get all those figures together and you will come up with an actual figure that you can put through the middle managers and the executive team. If I finish this project, people will search the average time that people will find stuff would go from 5 hours to 2 hours, and therefore I am saving the company that 3 hours times the 500 figure of the average salary. And there you go, I've got the figure that's there. um, and a lot of the executives accept that as a fact, as long as you've got your stats straight. Because always remember, when you're communicating, having numbers in your communication gives it validity, gives it truthfulness. I've learned it somewhere in either at university or something like that. But if there are figures in whatever it is that you communicate, immediately it says, I can trust this one because this person has researched. It's not just words, it's actual figures. So if you put figures in your communications, immediately authenticity and trustworthiness, you get that straight away. Um, Another value that you could use is, for example, if it's for a project. Thanks, Claire. The power of numbers. Yes, that's right. I don't know where I got it, but it stuck in my head over the years. You just put numbers and you get it. And I thought, nah, really people fall for that? They do. Years of experience with a lot of companies. Another figure that I commonly use as well, especially coming from oil and gas, is when I had to show value with, because I have to do a terms of reference for the project I was on for knowledge management within a specific project. Am I talking for Scotland now? Just checking my time. Sorry. I told you, Claire, I can talk through this. And I'm just on my first one. I only have 2 slides. another another thing is, another value you could use is your project cost, because in organizations, when project managers are asked to estimate what the project cost would be and how many people they need on the project, there is a standard project cost. In oil and gas, we always use $1,000 per week. So if you can find figures like that, yes, that's right. That's right, Elaine. Those figures are quite key. So this is an additional one. The project management cost, you could use that as well, because you can play around with that. The 1,000 call this the one in oil and gas, it's $1,000 per person per day, whatever the position is. It's a standard figure that's used in the oil and gas business. So that's what we use to calculate values in actual dollars and cents, because you guys would go through that. You would have gone through this most of the time. And another thing is, when you communicate things, you cannot use, especially on the C-level executives. What I have always done with all my projects is, the moment I get a project and I need to communicate value and how the work and progress, I always create a team SharePoint site. And then I give it to the executive teams, the managers, because you know what? They like dashboards. They like dashboards that show progression. I don't need to create a massive report. I only need to update my SharePoint site. In the olden days, I have a team, and I asked them to, to do all sorts of stats when all of the new functionalities wasn't available yet. And they like it. They like the fact that they're kept informed all the time. They can just copy and paste it if they need to report it for something. It's there. So the dashboards, the infographics, those are helpful. You have very clear values. You have very clear you can show very clear progressions on those dashboards and stats. Okay. And finally, I'll move on so that I can pass you on to Shona as well. The next one is, so once you've found the message on your hierarchy, what's your message for the what's your value message for the individual, what's your value message for the team, and what's your value message for a C class. So those are your layers. Now you need to do your stakeholder prioritization, because each engagement is different. Maybe you only have one stakeholder on the C level and a lot of stakeholders on the individual level. So each initiative would be different. But this is how you prioritize who you communicate with more often, or who do you keep closely with. So this is a very standard prioritization graph. So you've got people who are very high in power and highly interested people. You manage those people closely, especially if they can shut down your initiative. Those are the people you need to manage. If there's somebody, this is more of a stakeholder management scenario. Those are the people that you need to make sure have very clear, you clearly communicate with them on a regular basis, and they always see the value and they agree with the value. The buy-in is 100%, if not more. And then you get into the progression as you go along the way. So this is this one has always worked for me, whatever the size, whatever the initiative is. It could be a small initiative, it could be a massive global implementation. It always works. And I think that's me. And let me hand you over to Shona, unless there are any questions.
Right, I'm going to have a little pre-warning that I do have a second monitor that I plugged in. So when I do share screen, I have no idea what it's going to do, but we'll give it a go. I don't know which screen it's going to share. I only plugged it in this morning, so everything's going a bit mad. Right, if I try. Oh, hang on.
Give you the choice, Shona. It'll be fine. I had the same problem. Yeah.
Oh no, hang on. Now it's blah 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 blah. It's asking me questions.
You could put it on a single screen and then share desktop.
I think I might just unplug the other one.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. What?
You're welcome, Leanne. Is there any specific thing that you're struggling with?
Some random little pictures. Right, hang on. Let's try that again, because that evidently asked me a question that I. Right. Aha. You must authorize. Sorry, hang on. See, fancy pants, silly Max. Too clever for good. Anyway, I'll witter on whilst we go on. So my presentation, basically picking up. Sorry, I'm looking over here because I'm now trying to sort out security. Too much security. Yeah, so picking up on points of both Claire and Maria. I figured it out. Hang on. Oh, right, that's not going to work because it needs to quit that. Right, so we might not just not bother with that temporarily. There we go. So I'll possibly just follow on. Hang on, if I just do that. Back. 2 seconds, people. This is what happens when you try and do things in real life. Right, hang on. Enable screen share.
Yep, we've got. Awesome.
Hey!
That's really great, Tracy. Yep, there we go.
There we go. See, I've just unplugged the other one. Made it much easier. So yes, so picking up on both of the points of the previous speakers, mine is basically going to go how you put those two things together and obviously bring people together through the power of mostly biscuits. So never underestimate the power of a jammy dodger. What you must never forget is the next statement. Records management is boring to people that aren't us. People, if you say records management, people are just instantly thinking, I don't have time for whatever that is. So you get this face. If you come in and go, right, let's all do some records management. I want 5 hours of your day. People just do not want to hear it. They've got a million things to do with their own job, a million things to do that have been dumped on them from some other avenue that they were not expecting. And the last thing they want to do is something that you've rocked up, pretending is very important. Well, it is very important, but they don't know that. Called records management. So, appeal to what the people want. This is the inside of my shed at present. I should point out I have just moved house. The shed was new and all of that used to live in my living room, so it got thrown in there at high speed. But you don't always need to use work examples. So an example that I can use now is obviously you might want to prioritize how you're doing things and apply some metadata, etc., to the items in this shed. For example, I need that drill that's at the very back top corner and I can't get to it because I've put a bucket for a car I'm never going to wash and some sofa cushions, which quite frankly are not needed today because it is not sunny, and a bike which has 2 flat tires. The lawnmower does occasionally come in and out, but there needs to be some form of organization going on in there. And if you can convey that way of just take some time, organize things, sort things out, you can do it. If you start going on about files all the time, people will just switch off because to them that's work. It's not interesting, if that's the right terminology. They've got better things to do. They've got a million tasks that are sort of straining at deadlines. But if you can try and get them on board with the concepts, regardless of their level, then sometimes a little light bulb goes on and people will sort of suddenly engage with you. Another good example is if you have a little Google, then I can't remember who it was, and I blatantly stole it off somebody. But somebody said about explaining metadata through people by using the example of shopping on Amazon. So you put in brown shoes, you get brown shoes. Easy peasy. Everybody shops on Amazon. It makes sense to people, whereas if you start going on about metadata and all these other kind of wonderful words that we all find very familiar and interesting, it means nothing to them. So you need to understand that people are busy and that you need to try and get that little light bulb just going. Speak the language, which was basically my day yesterday. I've recently moved job roles, so I'm now somewhere new. And I spent most of yesterday on the phone to somebody asking them to translate about 1 million acronyms that somebody put in an email. So yeah, you do need to learn the language of the organization that you're in. there's always going to be weird abbreviations that people rattle off. Yesterday's was EC, which is an exceptional circumstances form, but my brain couldn't figure that out. Other places I used to work for city council, so they were all about TPOs, which sounds very interesting, and it is a tree preservation order, but nobody ever calls it a tree preservation order. It's just straight off always a TPO. So you need to find these funny little things, the way people use language, the little abbreviations, write yourself a list. I've got one going. And it helps you just speak the same language as them. And hopefully, again, we'll get people on board. I've got on this slide, finding influencers. So obviously you will have your obvious influencers, like your chief executives, things like this. What you need to do, if at all possible, is find the people who the rest of the organization will follow, but not in an official manner. PAs are always a good tap into that section. Otherwise, there's always just people who seem to have some kind of influence amongst the rest of the organization for a whole array of purposes, either that, you know, they bake really good cakes, they've done something amazing, they're just really nice and jolly, or they've led an initiative in the past that worked well, so you can kind of piggyback on the back of that. So always, obviously you're going to have your traditional influencers, but if you can try and find out who the sort of below the surface influences are, then that's sometimes always a good tap in. And again, as we mentioned before, tailoring your approach. So you can be casual. This is my old office where we loved the cake. We, in that office, went for the plan of, if we lured people in with the cake, then they will come and speak to us about cake. We love cake. But then that gave you an in. So they became to humanize you. So you were a person. And then when people were feeling a bit sort of stuck in a position with, records management problem or a data protection problem or any of these other things, you were approachable. So they could come and, they had that confidence and familiarity with speaking to you. So you didn't feel too foreign, and obviously you don't like cake. But then again, there are occasions when you will need to be formal. This was the only picture I could find of me being even vaguely formal. There will be occasions where you do need to. Sorry, I can hear the questions, but I can't see them at the moment. I've got a full screen of just me, so I will get back to them, or Maria can shout at me. So obviously you will be invited into sort of official committees and things like that you'll have to do reports. And those are fine. We're all prepared for that. This is a terrible example of how to do a PowerPoint presentation, but there's so much guidance on how to deliver formal reports. I'm not going to tell you all how to do that, but it's there. Again, biscuits, cakes and biscuits. Everybody will unite through the love of biscuits, regardless of whether they're chief executive or they're, way down the official chain. If you can get people in with bribery, then quite frankly, I'm all for it. So there's never enough cakes and biscuits in my world. But then 2020 hits. So these two little lovely gnomes are my current working companions. So I have my lunch with them if the weather is nice, and probably have discussed far too many things with two gnomes in a garden. So how do we assist people, but from a distance? Previously I would go and see people at their desks and help them go through said filing cabinet of mysterious files, but I can't do that now. How do you become personable, but through email? That's a tricky maneuver, because if you ever try rereading your own emails in a whole array of different voices, you can change the meaning of things quite simply. Obviously you can phone people, but then you're just a weird faceless voice, and is that helpful? You kind of lose that connection with people. And obviously you can't really do virtual biscuits. I did chuckle to myself when I thought of cookies earlier, but that's sad. So just to point out, this was my last office-based lunch in Edinburgh, As you can see, I went for the classic cheesy chips, some Christmas iron brew, and a double biscuit. And that was basically my inane ramblings for a Friday morning. And this just made me laugh, so please don't forget to wash your hands. I'm going to stop sharing this so I can see what all the little pingy pongs are. So that's it, Maria. So one of the other things I did think of earlier as well is that a lot of people have commented on the fact that I don't use, well, on Teams, don't use the blur background. I deliberately don't use the blur background because this array of weird stuff behind me is now kind of how I can connect to people. Obviously, I put the metadata book at the top today. But, you know, there are obviously advantages to using blur backgrounds in Teams and things. But again, it's quite interesting when you don't, because, well, if I scoot to screen them up here. So in a previous meeting, somebody noticed this band poster, this Baroness, in case you're into that. And then we had a big conversation about that afterwards. And then since then, we have gone on to have a kind of, oh, can I just ask you about like file naming conventions? And quite frankly, if somebody comes to you asking about file naming conventions, then just grab that with open arms. And yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing. Like, how do you be a person when you're just a sort of little random pixelated person on a screen? But you can find out, I think, quite a lot about somebody, and you have that little connection. And I've done this with the principal where I am, and that was, you know, quite terrifying. But then again, I've also done it with somebody in IT, and then discovered that he used to be a bassist for the Proclaimers because he had a gold disc on the wall, and I went, what's that? And so you can kind of get a bit more. So yeah, don't be too quick to blur your background. There ends my witterings.
Yeah, Claire was,
sorry, that was a bit quick.
yeah, Claire Burke was telling us about her GDPR cupcakes.
Oh, yeah. That's what you want.
And what else is there?
I was going to say,
saw
yes,
something.
the shopping lists, the way you go around the supermarket, all of those kind of things. But that's
Yeah.
because everybody does it. So it instantly connects with people. And that's what you need. You need that little lure in.
Yes, yes.
I've just started a massive project with a smallish organisation, but had to do everything since lockdown. So, you know, I've had more conversations about the dog and other people's dogs, and you know, we haven't quite got to the posters on the wall, but you're very aware of that sort of, as you say, humanizing chat that just warms up, you know, a potentially boring conversation about GDPR or files or structures or SharePoint or whatever. That's absolutely key, that having to do it through this mediation of pixelated things, never mind the whole hair conversations I've had.
Mine is hairspray and hope.
Yeah, well, you know, and it just helps connections. And whether you're into a new job or on a new project, it doesn't matter, because you need to establish the rapport, you know, from the outset. Yeah, it is quite revealing about what's in the backdrop. I've moved the plants. I've got my tomato plants sat round here as well. So they're now out of shot and taking advantage of the sunlight.
I really regret saying that.
Everyone's getting involved in the hair conversation.
Catherine is going, be grateful you can't see my hair. I'm sure we've all have that moment.
Another thing I'm thinking of, just as a smaller side, is that I don't. It's not gonna. So this used to live on the back of my work laptop, which basically just says "meetings suck." Very professional. I did take it off occasionally, and it was a sort of strange thought I had earlier about. Obviously, at the moment, people are kind of more inclined to do an online meeting because obviously you don't have to travel, blah, 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 blah. And if you, like me, have just been speaking to two gnomes for a while, seeing another human is quite nice. I was thinking, oh, when we do get back in the office eventually, will people be more into meetings, like sort of actually people physically in a room, or will we like stay in this sort of flat world of like, oh, it'd be interesting to see. Anyway, I'm bringing my own biscuits if we're sticking with this.
The power of food.
Yeah.
Food to entice. Okay. So yeah, that's quite very key. The food, conversation, normal conversation points. Um Friendliness, just approach it with a friendly. It's a very boring and sometimes very formal kind of. You don't need to go with that formality, isn't it? uh
I think that's sort of my stealth thing, that if you
yeah,
just, you're like, it's just organizing stuff, don't
yeah.
start telling them about metadata schemas because instantly it's gone.
Yeah, I'm away. I'm on holiday. Okay. So let's have a chat with Ryan about, because they've gone, Ryan and Claire Boyle at Hess has gone through this massively because of the implementation that they've done at Hess. So Ryan?
So yeah, I was taking some notes as you're all speaking. It was all familiar things that I was hearing. As Maria says, we're going through our implementation of SharePoint at the moment. It's it's going well, but it's an interesting thing when it comes to communications. Starting at the top, we have an 18,000 word business case, which I'm sure everyone on the call will agree is just ludicrous. But that's what. Well, it worked. Put it that way. Whether or not it was the best way to do it is up for debate. But certainly, my predecessor, many of you will have known David Paris, and myself have both had attempts at writing a business case whilst carrying on the rest of your job, and it was a challenge. So it was only really when we were able to get a bit of outside help in that was dedicated to getting this project up and running, that and hence the 18,000 words, that we were successful and we were able to get it through board. And when you read the business case, I just sort of flicked it up there, and it is fairly high level. It includes that cost savings and some quite eye-popping figures as to how much money we could save through just simply being able to find things a few seconds quicker each time. But yeah, it's quite high level. It's definitely aimed at SMT and at board, but it does include yeah, sorry, Claire. It does include a benefits section that outlines not only how it's going to be beneficial to Hess as an organisation. It certainly highlights how it will be beneficial to information governance from a records management perspective and a compliance perspective, but it also looks at how we believe it will be successful and helpful for regular users. So that's relatively strategic and high level. And then when we're going into implementation, we recognised a couple of things that we talked about. The key influencers, we were using or we are using super users. So they're the people within a business area that we'll go and speak to and lean on effectively to pass on what we want them, what the business area to do, and vice versa, get some feedback back from them. We've realised very quickly that finding the right super users is absolutely key to a successful migration. When you don't get the right one, it causes problems almost from day one, and we stuck with it with one business area. But I think in future, we've a lesson learned is to identify when you've picked the wrong one quite early and have that awkward conversation to make a change. But yeah, so going through the super users, identifying key influencers, and then when we come to the training, being a lot more, or it was face-to-face pre-lockdown, now it's obviously via video conference, but a lot more hands-on, a lot more in detail, how you do this, how you do that, obviously. I guess the thing that's constantly in the back of my head as I'm talking is that it all sounds great, and from a strategic point of view, tick those boxes, no problem at all. From a records management perspective, ticks my boxes. I know that we'll have a much clearer idea of what information we've got. It'll be in a far better structure than we've ever had, or had in a long time since paper files. But the initial feedback from regular users is they hate it, because they're so used to, in some cases, literally decades of shared files, and they knew their way of doing things. They'd done it for so long, they knew where to find things, and all of a sudden we've come along and talked about metadata. And the Amazon scenario, I've heard that one as well, Shona. I don't know if it was maybe even from you, but yeah, they like their old world. It's the standard change issue, that anything that's significant change gets resistant, or has resistance to it. So we're still learning. I mean, in my view, we've been very, very proactive in terms of the support we're giving. We're going around after post go live. One of my teams going around and sitting in the business area, going out physically asking people, because staff can be quite quiet and don't want to cause a bother and just get on with things, and then moan about it to their pals. So we've been quite pushy almost in trying to sit down and find out what problems are, and helping. And at least that side of it seems to be appreciated. And it again touches on what's been mentioned, finding the things that help them. I'm frantically thinking of a specific example, but there'll be something in our finance department around Excel spreadsheets that's maybe slightly different or more challenging in SharePoint. And if we're able to go in and make that first experience isn't great, but their second experience that bit better, they not only are they a lot happier with the product, but they also recognise that my team are A, there to help, and B, can help. And you do tend to find that then encourages other people to come around and go, so I've got this problem. How can you help, or can you help? So that has certainly helped. Seeing what else we've got. Completely agree with the sort of the words and the pictures, and use anything and everything that you can to get a message across. Keep things simple. The records management by stealth is a favourite of mine. We shouldn't, in my opinion, we shouldn't be asking regular members of staff to do records management, because you will fail every time. They have their own job to do, and they much prefer doing that. If we embed processes that are massively onerous on them, the filing will always go to the bottom of the to-do list. That being said, so all of that is largely carrot. I think one thing we have also recognised is, when we talked about benefits for the user, it was things will be quicker, you'll be able to find things better, and all this. Well, in the end, that isn't necessarily the case, because they are so used to what they were using for the several years previous. And what we didn't stress possibly enough, certainly with our finance colleagues, is the compliance side of it, and that we're doing this for a reason, from a compliance reason, sorry, as well as all the benefits that will hopefully appear, even if it's slightly longer than we anticipated. And when we started saying, well, retention, for example, at the moment, the rest of the organisation that isn't on SharePoint, there's no retention. There's retention schedules, but no retention's really done, if we're perfectly honest. If it is, it's done on a very ad hoc basis. Now we've got Record Point, which is attached to our SharePoint, and it'll all be automated. So I was trying, when I explained to them, well, actually, we've never asked you to do retention before, because we knew it was an almost impossible task. The option was twofold. Either you suck up getting into the SharePoint and learn to use that and become more au fait with that, and with that will be automated retention, and so you'll never need to bother very much anyway with retention. It'll be done in the background. Or the alternative was, we were going to have to roll out a quite clunky manual process, or likely have to roll out a quite clunky manual process for deleting records. And there was a bit of a, oh, all right, I see what you mean. So it's, again, links into what's been talked about. It's finding what pushes people's buttons at different levels of the organisation, and accepting that you'll never please everybody.
Unless you bribe them with biscuits.
Yeah, I need to be better at that. I don't think I've got anything else on. My connection is cutting out as well, which doesn't help.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, I suppose the only thing actually that popped in at one point was all these different ways of doing things and different prioritize, or different people or groups to prioritize is great, but I don't know about everyone else. It's getting the time to do all these things. So we've talked about for donkeys that we want to create training videos that would just be sort of showing someone how you do it and a bit of a voiceover thing. And we think it'd be a really easy and successful way of showing people how to use the new document center or any other bit of records management or data protection or whatever. And it's been a great idea for ages, and it's only now, I think we've got one video up. And that's because the project had someone who was looking to sort of develop themselves a little bit, and we're prepared to take that on board. So I think my boss always says you should give yourself a bit of a break, Ryan, and I think this is a little bit of it, that there's loads of good ideas out there, and it's trying to find the ones that will give you the biggest bang for the buck and not castigating yourself for not having done them all. And I think if you can focus on the communication approaches that will get the biggest effect, that's the way to go with it.
Thank you, Ryan. So Claire was asking if anybody has questions, but yes, I agree, Stephen. I'm a diabetic as well. We can't have a
We
jolly
did
daughter.
want to have fruit kebabs and nuts. I mean, savoury things, and I think yeah, nobody ate any of those. We evidently didn't have the correct audience in the room at that point, but
Gosh, there's been a stream of food scenario.
there we go. Iceland shop to go to.
Yeah.
And the kind of the humanizing things, obviously knowing,
Yeah.
if Maria or Stephen was to be coming to that meeting, it's that sort of little personable thing that, now I know that. So next time.
Yeah. No, because if we do something like this, if you humanize it and make it more relatable, then you get the core message across. It's almost like a medium for your message to go through, because especially IM and RM in organizations, they sometimes they're on their own, and sometimes they belong to the larger IT organization, which has always been very serious, very. I was like, come on. My view is, if you're not having fun with your work, that is a very sad situation. So have fun with it. I mean, uh, these are the friendly ones, and you'll find that it's easier. It also helps you network and build relationships. And build those relationships, because sometimes those relationships, whether they like your idea or not, persevere. There are situations like that. So apart from questions from everybody, what are your current concerns? Maybe it's something that we can discuss here. If you put it on the chat window, it's something that we could discuss. Goodness, that food scenario is quite.
I think everybody's food and shopping. That's it. You're straight in there. Because it's two things that everybody does. So
I thought everybody diets in this country.
previously.
Previously. Now
Put jar far away, just lunge there and back, one at a time. Done.
Yeah. So anybody has some current issues that they'd want to bring forward, and then we can deliberate on it.
Now, see, there's a question just come up from Claire. Well, comment. Back in my old organisation, we had an opportunity to rename our team, So
Oh, okay.
we're the modern records unit, which means nothing to
Yeah,
anybody.
yeah.
People are like, so what date does that start? And you're like, it's not a
Modern.
date, it depends on the business purpose for which the record was created. You're like, oh, shoot me now. Um, we were kind of there like, could we be like the stuff department? So we help you with stuff
Stuff.
and things. Because people don't come to you and say, oh, I've got a big pile of files and records. They come, I've got all this stuff and it's in a guddle and I don't know what to do with it. And people keep asking me for things and I don't know where they are. So, you know, it's that kind of thing that sometimes, depending on the organization and what their people do, they don't think they have records because records are terribly formal and very important. You're like, well, actually, no, you really do. But depending on what they do with them, they might not recognize them as records. So, yeah.
Yeah. So Elaine says the data busters.
I Okay, that white suit and everything.
Yeah. This is where, as a profession, we struggle. This is the information age. This is our age. When I took my librarianship in, I okay, I will reveal now ages and stuff. So I graduated from uni in librarianship in 1988. I never imagined that this profession would boom as much as it did. So from 1988, and then the internet came along, and then every social media, now the cloud, and everything else. I never thought that our profession would boom this way. We are in the middle, depending on where you want to put yourself. As professionals, there's massive amounts of things that we handle and make and improve and make better and make sense of, because there's such a deluge of information right now.
I was going to say, I think at the moment it's very interesting as well because there's a lot of things coming up with obviously like the COVID tracking apps.
Yeah.
So people are suddenly aware of, you know, really quite technical privacy issues.
Yeah.
Even things sort of like the Windrush scandal, that's pretty much entirely based on records and a lack of records management. And all of these things keep coming up. And so people are connecting things and going, oh, I get it, I see. And, you know, I don't think my mum still has a clue what I do, but every now and again, a little thing, and she's like, oh, is that's like what you do? I was like, yes, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, some of us need to be brought up from the basement now, now that they
I was just
understand.
commenting the other day, I really quite miss my battling pigeons and infestations of ladybirds in my old store. Oh. But luckily there's no infestations in my own house yet.
Yeah, yeah. But that's
I suspect you'll find new ones at your workplace in due course.
Oh yeah. Well, there might be one in the back of my shed, I'm not very sure.
There's bound to be something.
yeah. Oh, Claire, before as we wrap up. Yep.
No, just just aware that time's moving on. So, and people have also got other things to
Including
do,
lunch,
including
yep.
lunch, just to keep that priority of nourishment up there. I hope folk have found that a useful session. And if you don't have questions now, let's keep the conversation going between times, or save it for the next IRMS coffee morning. The date of
We
which
do it
I
every
can't
2
remember.
weeks, so
Maria,
we'll
do you
have
have-
one next week. I'll send out the links on the comms as well.
BYOB. Bring your own biscuits.
Yes, bring your own biscuits.
Absolutely, yes.
And next Friday. I forgot. Yeah, we it on a Friday, so I'll bring that. And of course, guys, I'm saying that this com skills is part of the soft skills thing. If there are other things that you want to learn about, there negotiating, management, supervision. What other soft skills that's
Hairdressing.
maybe not. um, Project management. If that is something of interest to everyone, please do tell us, so we could bring all of these with our webinars, together with our other webinars on the technology and on the core skills good RM as well. So that's me. And Claire, Claire, would you like to say your wrap up?
Well, yeah, just I hope that's given you a kind of, you know, very personal perspectives, a lot of, I think, agreement on the kind of the value and the kind of requirements that the profession is now demanding of us. I certainly think there's a lot of kind of really useful technology out there to support it, but I think it underlines that it comes back to people and personal connections and being able to make those connections so often, whether you are, you know, project-based, consultant, internal advisor, part of technology initiative, or reorganization. You know, there's so much in terms of the human connection that we really need to build on, and it's so easy to focus on the kind of skills that you feel you don't have or don't have sufficiently, and just be a bit overwhelmed by that. But I think hopefully what we've tried to convey today is actually the power of personality and people, even when you are, you know, not a natural performer or not happy necessarily being in the limelight. You know, there's still a lot of bedrock skills that you need to have in order to do your job well. So hopefully that's given us all a bit of confidence to project our project with confidence. Okay, well, tune in again
Thanks
next
so much.
time. And
Yes.
if you have, as Maria says, a topic, or you are interested in becoming a speaker, please do make yourself known to us. Okay, well, cheerio,
Thank you
guys.
so much. Bye. You'll get
Thank
the
you.
link and email to the replay of the video for this webinar, and you can access it with that one. So thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Keep safe and well, whether you're at the beach or at the lake or somewhere. Bye.
Bye.
See you later.